I moved into the apartment on a Thursday afternoon with nothing but a mattress, a coffee table, and 2 duffel bags full of clothes. It was the cheapest place I could find within city limits, and the kind of building that had a permanent smell, like someone had boiled cabbage in the hallway decades ago, and the scent just decided to live here rent-free. My new landlord, a wiry man with a lazy eye named Gary, didn't bother giving me much of a tour. He just handed me a set of tarnished brass keys and told me not to go poking around in other people's business, because the tenants here valued their privacy. I didn't think much of it at the time. The apartment itself was basic. A narrow kitchen, a cramped living room, and a long hallway that ran from the front door to the bedroom. The bedroom door was at the very end, with the hallway light flickering in that irritating horror movie way. The first night I was too tired from hauling boxes and rearranging furniture to notice much. I went to bed around midnight, left my phone on the nightstand, and was out cold in minutes. At some point I woke up without knowing why. No noise, no dream. I just opened my eyes and felt instantly alert. The red glow of my alarm clock read 2:14 a.m. That's when I saw him. At the far end of the hallway, just beyond the faint light bleeding in from the kitchen, there was a man. Tall, easily over 6 feet, wearing what looked like a black coat that hung down to his knees. His face was shadowed, not because the hallway was dark, but like something about him swallowed the light. I couldn't see his features at all, just the suggestion of eyes catching the faintest glint. He didn't move. He just stood there, facing me, completely still. I blinked hard, convinced it was a trick of my half-asleep brain. But when my eyes opened again, he was still there. My heart started to race. I reached for my phone, but the moment my hand moved, my vision seemed to twitch, like a frame had been cut out of reality. Suddenly, the hallway was empty. I sat there for a long time, clutching my phone, trying to convince myself it was a dream. The next day, I shrugged it off, went to work, and didn't think about it until the second night. Again, I woke up at 2:14 a.m. Again, I saw him. Same position, same height, same utter stillness. This time, though, his head tilted slightly, like he was acknowledging me. My throat tightened and my skin crawled. I whispered hello without thinking. His head straightened instantly, like the motion had been reversed. Then nothing. I stayed awake until morning. Night 3, I locked the bedroom door before bed. I even pushed my coffee table in front of it, which felt ridiculous, but I needed the comfort of some kind of barrier. Sure enough, 2:14 a.m. came, and I woke to the sound of the hallway light flickering. I couldn't see him directly from the bed with the door closed, but something in me knew he was there. The air felt charged the way it does before a lightning strike. And then, 2 slow, deliberate knocks on the bedroom door. I froze. My phone was in my hand, but I didn't call anyone. The knocks didn't repeat. When I worked up the courage to check, the hallway was empty, the flickering light steady again. I told myself I was done. I'd sleep somewhere else, crash at a friend's place. But the 4th night, something happened that made me realize this wasn't about me seeing it. This was about him seeing me. I didn't wake up at 2:14 a.m. Instead, I woke up in the morning, feeling oddly relieved. That relief lasted until I opened my bedroom door and saw something new at the far end of the hallway. The man was gone, but on the wall, scrawled in something dark, were 3 words in shaky, uneven letters. I see you. That night I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I didn't tell anyone at work about what I had seen because, honestly, how do you explain that without sounding insane? I just told them I wasn't feeling well and left it at that. When I got home, I made myself a pot of coffee and sat in the living room, positioned so I could see the hallway from where I was on the couch. My plan was simple: stay awake until 2:14 and see what happened. Maybe it was all just in my head. Maybe I was sleepwalking or half dreaming. I even thought about setting up my phone to record, but a part of me didn't want evidence. I think I was scared of proving it was real. The building was quiet, eerily quiet, just the occasional groan of pipes and the faint hum of the fridge. I glanced at the clock. 2 a.m. My stomach was in knots. I stared into that hallway, the dim yellow glow from the single ceiling bulb casting shadows on the cracked walls. At 2:14 on the dot, there he was. I didn't see him arrive. It was like he had always been there, and my eyes just adjusted to notice him. Same height, same stillness, same faceless blackness where his head should have been. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. He didn't move, but I could feel this pressure, like a weight in the air, pressing against me. I wanted to stand, to confront him, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I just sat there frozen, staring. Then I realized something. He was closer. Not by much, maybe a foot closer than the night before. But it was enough for my brain to scream at me that this wasn't just imagination. He was getting nearer. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to blink, to move, to do something. But by the time I snapped out of it, the clock read 2:15 and the hallway was empty again. I didn't sleep after that. The next day I seriously considered breaking my lease. But the truth was, I didn't have the money to move. This place was dirt cheap, and I was barely keeping afloat as it was. I thought about crashing at a friend's place, but that felt cowardly. Instead, I convinced myself I just needed more information. That night I set my phone camera on a chair facing the hallway, hit record, and waited. I sat on the couch again, coffee in hand, eyes glued to the shadows. My heart pounded harder as the clock approached 2:14. When the minute struck, he was there again, and I swear to you, he was another foot closer. I could almost make out the edges of a mouth now, like the blackness was peeling away to reveal something beneath. My phone was recording, and I thought, finally, I'll have proof. But then my phone screen went black, like it had died. I knew I'd charged it, but it was dead anyway. The man in the hall tilted his head slightly like he knew what I had tried to do. My throat was dry, my hands shaking. 2:15 came and he was gone. This time, I grabbed my phone, still dead, and noticed it felt warm, like it had been overheated. The next morning it powered on fine, but the recording was gone. I didn't delete it, it was just gone. Night after night this went on, each time the man in the hall getting closer. 4 feet away, 3, 2. Every time I tried to record, the footage would vanish or the phone would die. I bought a cheap camcorder, same thing happened. Electronics just wouldn't work at 2:14 a.m. in that hallway. It was like he knew. And with every night, it was getting harder to breathe when he appeared, like the air got heavier the closer he came. By the 6th night, he was standing just a few feet from my bedroom door. I could see his hands now, long skeletal fingers that twitched slightly, like he was barely restraining himself from using them. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I would sleep in the living room that night, lock the bedroom door, and keep every light in the apartment on. But that night, 2:14 came and the lights flickered. The hallway bulb went out completely, plunging it into black. I could see the outline of him even in the dark. Impossibly tall now, like he had grown. My chest was tight, my vision narrowing. Then, footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate. For the first time, he was moving toward me while I was still awake. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like concrete. The steps stopped halfway, and I realized he was waiting for something. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. And then, just as the clock ticked to 2:15, he turned and vanished into the darkness like he'd been sucked away. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound I heard as he disappeared. My own voice whispering from the hallway, "See you tomorrow." That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I kept the lights on, the blinds drawn, and the baseball bat lying across my lap. I'd called in sick to work and spent most of the day pacing my apartment, every creak in the building making my skin tighten. The thing is, I couldn't tell if I was more afraid of him actually being there or of him not showing up at all. If he was there, at least I could see him, measure the distance, gauge my time limit. If he wasn't, it meant he might have changed the rules. I sat there in the chair facing the hallway, my phone in one hand, the bat in the other, eyes locked on the open bedroom door. 1:55 a.m. rolled around and my heart rate spiked. I tried calling the landlord again, Voicemail. I thought about calling the cops, but I already knew how that would go. A man in your hallway, inside your locked apartment, who disappears before we arrive. They'd think I was crazy. 2:13 came. I held my breath. I swear, the air felt like it thickened. The light above me buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. And then, just as the minute turned to 2:14, there he was. Taller than before, or maybe it was the way he stood. His head was tilted slightly now, like he was studying. That black void where his face should be didn't make sense. It wasn't just shadows. It was absence. My eyes burned looking at it, like my brain was refusing to process what it was seeing. He was closer, not by much, maybe a foot, but I could tell. His arms hung too long, fingertips brushing the floor. I gripped the bat so hard my knuckles ached. "What do you want?" I forced the words out, my voice cracking. No answer. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, head tilted. After what felt like an hour, I blinked, and he was gone. Just gone. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, but the smell in the hallway, like damp concrete and rot, was still there. I didn't sleep, couldn't. The next night I tried something different. I placed my phone at the end of the hall, recording video toward where he always appeared. I locked myself in the bedroom with the bat and sat on the bed, staring at the door. 2:14 came and went. Nothing. Not even the smell. I almost laughed, thinking maybe it was over. But then, 3:07 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open. My stomach dropped. I'd locked it. I know I'd locked it. I raised the bat, my hands shaking so bad I could barely keep it steady. And then I saw him, in my room now, by the foot of my bed. He was hunched to fit beneath the ceiling, his head tilting the opposite way now. That void where a face should be was maybe 2 feet from mine. I don't know if it was the light or my brain breaking, but I swear I saw movement inside that darkness, like something shifting just beyond the veil. I screamed. I don't even remember deciding to. The lights flickered, and in the half-second of darkness, he was gone. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, keys, and bolted out of the building. I drove to a motel 2 towns over, leaving my phone and everything else behind. When I came back the next day to grab my stuff, the landlord was waiting outside. He looked pale, shaken. He said, "I told you to keep that door locked at night." I told him I had. He just stared at me and said, "Not your door." And before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away. That night, I didn't go back. But when I checked my phone, the one I'd left in the hallway, the video file was still there. It showed nothing at 2:14, but at 3:07, the camera glitched. And for a single frame, you could see him crouched halfway down the hall, his head turned toward the lens. And the worst part? His arm was reaching out toward the phone, fingers extended, like he was about to grab it. I couldn't tell if the darkness was thicker tonight or if my eyes were simply struggling to keep up. But as soon as I blinked and my vision adjusted, I saw him. No longer a silhouette, no longer a vague shadow at the far end of the hall. The man was close, far closer than he had any right to be, without me hearing him move. He stood maybe 6 feet away, right in front of my bedroom doorway, the light from the street barely catching his features, or what should have been features. His face was an uncanny blur, like I was looking at it through a wet pane of glass. I felt my knees locked, my entire body refusing to obey the screaming in my head, telling me to shut the door, lock it, throw something heavy against it, anything to keep him from getting in. But I didn't move, and he didn't move either. It was like we were locked in some kind of invisible staring contest, though I couldn't actually see his eyes. And then I realized something. His chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. Or if he was, the rhythm was so wrong, my brain refused to recognize it as human. The seconds dragged into minutes, the minutes into something far worse. At some point, I realized my phone was still in my hand, but I didn't dare look away from him to call anyone. I thought of bolting for the window, but the idea of turning my back to him made bile rise in my throat. Then, as if he'd heard the thought in my head, he spoke. The voice was low and raspy, almost like two voices trying to speak at once, overlapping in a way that made my skin feel like it was being unzipped from the inside. "It's too late for that," he said. The words hit me in a way no sound ever has, like they bypassed my ears entirely and went straight into my skull. My legs buckled, and I caught myself on the doorframe, which is when I realized something even worse. He was closer, just inches from me now. I hadn't seen him move. I hadn't even blinked. I stumbled backward into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the old frame rattled. I threw my dresser in front of it, then my desk, then grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed. I stood there, shaking so hard the bat clattered against the floorboards. No footsteps, no banging, just silence. I held that position until my calves burned and my shoulders ached, waiting for the sound of the dresser being shoved aside. It never came. Eventually, exhaustion got the better of me, and I slid down against the wall, the bat still in my hand. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up to daylight spilling through the blinds. My first thought was that it had all been some elaborate nightmare, but when I looked at the dresser, I saw it. Deep, vertical grooves carved into the wood, like something had dragged long, sharp fingers across it. I left that day, packed what I could carry, and didn't even bother telling the landlord why. I didn't care about breaking the lease or losing the deposit. I moved into a friend's spare room 2 towns over, thinking distance would be enough. For a while it was. I started sleeping again, eating again, almost convincing myself that maybe the building had just done something to my mind. But last night at exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up. I knew before my eyes opened that I wasn't alone. The air in the room was heavy, oppressive, every instinct in me screaming not to look. But I did. And there he was, standing at the foot of my bed, his head tilted unnaturally to one side, that same blurred face hovering over me. Only this time, there was no hall between us, no doorway, no escape. He leaned closer, until the cold of his breath washed over my skin, and in that doubled, impossible voice, he whispered, "Told you I'd get here."
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.
"You can't call me at work," I said. "This is highly unprofessional." "I'm sorry," he said, "but I got something special. Never seen anything like it." Angel wasn't much for hyperbole. He'd done this for years. If he said he'd never seen anything like it, and he's calling me at work about it, it must be special. "I'm listening. I got a new source. They have something amazing." "Green? Of course. That's what you pay me for. I wouldn't risk it." I nodded. I'd never had a problem working with Angel before, and he was usually great at proofing his sources. "I'm a collector, not a monster." "What do you have?" "Honestly, I don't have the slightest idea, but I'll bet my ponytail you'll love it." That, if anything, was interesting. Not the ponytail, but the offer. I've always had an interest in the macabre. I feel an amazing sense of control when people talk to me or visit my house, not knowing what I keep in the dark collection room. It makes me feel like I'm stronger and smarter, like a fox among chickens, confidently strutting among them. It brings me the confidence I need to do my job, and it earns me the money to support my lavish lifestyle. I've been collecting for years. It started with leftovers and vestigial parts, milk teeth and tonsils, just these useless little things that were thrown away. A discarded umbilical cord was my first step up, and when I got my first parasitic twin, I was ecstatic. It was all supposed to be discarded and thrown away, but to me it turned into a wonderful collection. Over the past 15 years, I've expanded into 2 rooms, shelf after shelf of discarded organs, and enough bones to construct a complete human skeleton from dozens of people. I have 6 different human hearts, 3 brains, 8 pairs of eyes, organs who couldn't or wouldn't be donated, some from the young, some from the old, some healthy, some sick, some disfigured. I prefer the latter. They make for more interesting pieces, but they have to be green. No grave robbing, no illegal harvesting, nothing unethical. either willing or dead, and nothing marked for donation. If someone needs that heart, I don't want it. But a pair of eyes with heterochromia from someone who peacefully passed? I have a place for those. I'd honor those. Maybe get a little rotating platform. I didn't just want to have volumes of organs, though. I wanted variety, and most of all, rarity. I worked with a few doctors and morticians over the years, but most were squeamish and uncomfortable. I could rarely get anything, not to mention anything fresh. But a few years ago, I started talking to Angel. Angel works exclusively online. I know he has a vast contact network, but he works mostly in North America, mostly the East Coast, but sometimes in the Midwest. I know he has certain illegal dealings, especially in the high-end wine trade, but he always played it straight with me. He has the proper documentation and can prove to me not only that the organ is what it is, but that the patient is either dead, unharmed, or consenting. Green. As I say it out loud, it sounds so brutal. That's not what this is about. This is about control and that delicious warmth in my chest. It feels like being Clark Kent, knowing that all that stands between you and the complete ruin of everyone around you is social convention, mercy, and a pair of glasses. I got the big S right there, my trophies. That day when Angel called me, I had no idea what to expect. So when I got an email with 20 attached images, my heart was racing. I grabbed a glass of dry white, dimmed the lights, and spun my chair around. It was an unknown patient, dead of blunt force trauma, possibly some kind of traffic accident. No one had claimed the body. No one seemed to know who they were. But this person, this anonymous nobody, had some really strange features. During the autopsy, Angel's contact reached out to see if we were interested in some lovingly named leftovers. And the pictures they showed me, well, it gave me the shivers. I had no idea what I was looking at. Wonderful. It looked like a human organ, but it was either smoke damaged or almost fermented. Less than 6 hours out of the body and almost completely black. It looked like it was wrapped in some sort of seaweed with little barbs holding it all together. I had no idea what I was looking at, and I was already salivating over it. This was going to be preserved and given a proper placing for sure. They say this is a second heart, the email read. A piggyback heart, a growth added on top of the regular heart to help combat heart disease. But I've never seen anything like it. Those are usually added surgically. This is organic. It has no name. My contact wants to study it, but they're willing to send it off once they've done preliminary scans. Not gonna lie, this will cost you. It is not damaged. Eucalyptus fresh, green as grass. I had to have it. This was a unique find, as close to mint as I could get. I wanted to know all about it, and I wanted to have this trophy. It deserved my admiration. I didn't even try to play it cool. I knew Angel wouldn't try to rip me off. I just asked him to name his price. Angel got back to me the next day. He hired a courier and assured me the package would be delivered within 36 hours. He sent me more pictures, along with a few links to the accident. Some guy in a raincoat hit by a truck and didn't look like much. Angel didn't want to say too much as to not reveal his sources, but it looked legitimate. For an entire day, I was like a kid waiting to open a Christmas present. A genuine, unique type of organ in my collection. I had a few rarities, but this was different. This could be something new. This would elevate me one step over the other collectors. Of course there are others. What's the point of a collection if you can't brag about it? When I got home, there was this nervous 20-something outside my door, tapping her foot. She just handed a cooler over and ran. No confirmation if I was the right person, no code word, no notification, nothing. Angel usually has more professional people. Getting a delivery from sketchy people makes you look sketchy in turn, you know? But I brought it in and opened it up. I prepared myself and cut the foam open. Still ice cold, with vacuum packaging. Marked with Hatchet Pharma, like most of Angel's deliveries. You can't miss it with that icy blue plastic wrapper. It's a pain to open, though. I put on my gloves and started preparing a preservative jar. I had a few jars that would work while I got something fancier for the showroom. Even though I'd done this literally hundreds of times, I was visibly nervous. My hands were shaking. When I cut the bag open and reached in to grab the organ, I immediately felt a sting on the tip of my finger. The barbs were sharp. Bringing it out into the light, I finally got a better view of it. The thing was bigger than my fist. This was not just a piggyback heart. This thing was an entire organ in and of itself. It was a dark hazelnut brown with black veins. Some sort of dark green skin flaps covering up the edges. Parts of it had these sharp barbs, some sort of keratin. I'd never seen anything like it. I could tell that it had a structure similar to a human heart, though. It had clear connections to the pulmonary artery. But with just a quick look, it looked more like a dragon fruit. It was glorious. I couldn't wait to find out more about it. I gently placed it in the preservative, trying not to prick my fingers again. I was very pleased. My finger hurt a little, though. I spent hours in my lounge chair, just looking at the thing in the dim light of my collection. A mild teal spotlight, casting a sharp contrast. Even with a temporary preservative jar, I had it on a rotating platform so I could see it from every angle. I still couldn't tell what was the right orientation. What was the front and back? It was impossible to tell. It barely looked like, well, anything. I fell asleep in that chair, waking up just past midnight. I shut the lights up and got ready for bed. I didn't even think about the ache in my fingertip, where the barb had punctured my skin. I fell in and out of sleep all night. I had a fever, and by morning I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom a dozen times, and I was sweating buckets. The sheets were sticking to my body, and I was drooling like an idiot. My feet were wet from sweat, leaving stains across the floor. I barely had the energy to stand, and my balance kept failing me. The only point where I felt truly alive was when I was getting up from the toilet and fell over. My warm cheek against the cold bathroom tiles was the greatest thing I'd felt in years. I managed to crawl into the kitchen. I called in sick for the first time in years and fell asleep leaning against the kitchen island. I kept blinking in and out of consciousness. I probably sat there for a few hours. I woke up with this big chemical-smelling puddle under me, and my robe was covered in mucus. I tried to call for help, but I was too weak to hold the phone. I just remember smearing gross across the screen, and the face recognition just refused to work. I couldn't get a fingerprint either. I sat there all morning, just trying to muster the strength to move. I had bouts of panic, thinking I might not ever recover, that this would be it. I would feel my pulse hammering, and I could physically feel my heart moving. Despite my body giving up, my heart was as strong as ever. A bit too strong, it felt like. It hurt like hell. I managed to get some water from the tap, but I couldn't keep it down. I kept slipping and falling over, bruising my knees and elbows. It was a goddamn miracle that I didn't crack my head open. I woke up on the kitchen floor sometime in the afternoon. The sky was gray outside, and I could hear rain smatter against the windows. I managed to sit back up and grab some orange juice from the fridge. Just getting back up on my legs was exhausting, and I found myself wheezing for air. Sitting there, chugging a jug of orange juice, all I thought about was getting through this. My head was starting to clear, but my chest still felt weird. I hadn't even noticed my finger. My entire fingertip was just one big boil that had burst sometime during the day. I managed to stumble into the shower and dump all clothes into a pile. I was covered in cuts, bruises, and these big discolored circles on my legs. I looked about as good as I felt, but at least I was back on my legs. Shaky legs, but still. There were still smatterings against my window, but it sounded more intense. I didn't think about it at first. I was just concentrating on staying upright. I'd clean the mess in the kitchen once I felt better. This was probably just some temporary thing that needed to get out of my system. Food sickness, or some kind of bug. I didn't even think about my latest collection piece. I keep those two lives very separate. By the time I stepped out of the shower and into a fresh robe, I kept having these flashes. It was as if the lights were turning on and off. It took me a few seconds to realize it was coming from the window. Looking out, my breath stopped. Something was moving past the window, casting a long shadow across the floor. Then, something else moved. Again and again, big shadows whooshed past the window, their large shadows making the entire room blink. I took a step closer, blinking. For a while, I couldn't see them. It was as if they were there, and at the same time, they weren't. But when they were there in horrifying detail. They were the size of large dogs, these pale, winged, six-fingered beasts. Round, beady eyes, reflecting what little light slipped between the clouds. Like insects flocking to a lamp, they swarmed around my windows, fighting to get a look at me. Carefully, they tried to pull at the window frames, probing for a weakness. A way in. I just stood there, looking at them. It felt like my heart was about to cramp. One of them clung to the window, staring at me, unblinking. I couldn't comprehend it. I just closed my eyes and started hitting my head over and over, like trying to beat the image out of my skull. I groaned in frustration and felt my pulse rise. When I finally opened my eyes again, they were gone. I slowly backed away from the window, as if trying not to knock over a house of cards. As my heart snagged on something, a barbed pain shot through my lungs. At the edge of every heartbeat, they came back into view, blinking in and out of existence. One moment, all I heard was rain. The next, they were clawing themselves in. They were there, and at the same time, they weren't. I needed help, but my phone had run out of batteries. I splashed my face with cold water and stepped away to check on my collection. I had to get a closer look at this mystery organ. There was a kinship there, one sick heart to another. It was oozing out of the jar. The preservatives had turned a solid blue, and the organ had swelled. It had doubled in size, and the little barbs had turned long and soft, like tendrils. But the strangest thing was what it had done to the rest of my collection. The other jars were also swelling, some preservatives turning blue, cracking the glass, and dripping onto the floor. As my pulse rose and fell, seemingly at random, I could see flashes of the organ moving. 1 second it was trying to break out of the jar, the next it was just sitting there. Much like the creatures outside, it was both happening, and not at the same time. My head was flashing hot and cold, and I could feel my legs buckling. Maybe it was all just the fever. Maybe nothing was wrong. Maybe I was still on the cool bathroom floor. The warmth and cold that pulsed in my head made it hard to stay upright. The floor felt crooked, but I think it might just have been me. I hurried back into my living room. For a moment, it was all quiet. Then, a torrent of sounds, faces scratching claws, and leathery wings slamming against the windows. Then, a heartbeat later, all quiet. Over and over again, it was as if another world tried to beat itself into my mind. Two realities, trying to fit into my head at once. Slamming, scratching, screeching. It could go either way. It felt like a part of me was balancing on the edge of a knife, ready to fall one direction or the other. Screech, scratch, slamming against the windows with hopeless abandon. But there was another noise, a voice. Hello. I stepped into the hallway. I could see the shadows from the window behind me come and go with my irregular heartbeats. But there was a strange metallic noise coming from the front door. I turned the corner. There was something standing in my hallway. And a moment later, it wasn't. My door was open and also broken, hanging loose from the bottom hinge. A dark, towering creature. It was there and not. Large enough that it had to tilt its head to stand upright. With his impossibly long arms and fingers, he held a simple paper bag, dripping with blood. Then, he was gone. My breathing slowed. I just stood there trying to calm down. Everything was fine. Door closed, gentle rain tapping at my windows. Then, the paper bag was held up against my face. The creature was looming over me. The winged beasts outside were going crazy. "Give him what he wants!" A muffled voice from inside the bag pleaded. "He just wants it back. Please, just give it back to him." I fell backwards, crawling desperately. My sweaty hands slipped on the hardwood floor, scratching my palms and losing traction. It took the creature no more than 2 steps to catch up to me, holding the bag out towards me. "It's not yours to keep," the bag screamed. "You got your own!" There was no doubt in my mind. Forcing myself to stand, I crashed into my collection room, knocking over jars and trophy cases, little boxes of teeth, little stands of mummified fetuses. The jar with the strange organ had cracked, leaking a blue thick fluid onto the floor. It was a mess. It was all just a big, disgusting chemical mess. I grabbed the organ, feeling the soft barbs. little tendrils tickling my arm. I stepped back to the large creature and held out the organ. It turned its bag inside out, as something soft splattered onto the floor. Something meaty and human with a ponytail. A decapitated head trying to breathe, opening and closing its mouth like a trout. I dropped the organ in the bag. The next moment, I was alone. A broken collection. Formalin and alcohol running rampant over the floor. My feet barely avoiding the broken glass. And just outside, the rain gently tapped against my window. I haven't experienced anything like it since. The floor wasn't crooked and the door was fine. No scratches on the windows, no bloodstains, no nothing. And still, the organ is gone. I haven't been able to get back in contact with Angel. It's like a line was cut, and I haven't heard from him since. Something must have happened. I have my suspicions, but I don't think I can handle that path just yet. It still feels like I'm one bad thought away from stepping back into that dark world, like the winged creatures are still looking for a way in. I was sick for days afterwards, and I looked awful. I've since contacted a medical professional. They have found some irregularities with my pulse, and I'm waiting for x-ray results. I don't want to sound too alarmed, but the doctor brought in 3 other people to consult with. I know this story doesn't make me sound all too sympathetic. I'm no saint, and to a lot of people I guess I come off as a bit of a creep. But if you can just put that aside for a bit and think of me as a human, then please. Pray that the results are normal.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.
I've had a fear of rats for as long as I can remember. I don't know exactly what it is about them that scares me. It's not just the tail or the way they move or how they sound. It is everything, and it is nothing. To me, rats have always been synonymous with unconditional terror. It all comes from a childhood trauma. A large rat chased me up a hill, where I had to hide in a tool shed. The thing seemed rabid, and I had to sit in there for at least an hour, listening to the squeals and cries of the desperate thing that wanted to eat me. It was an unusually big rat, larger than some cats I've seen. It's called musophobia, and up until recently, it hasn't really been an issue. I mean, sure, I can get panic attacks and a flight reaction by just seeing one, but I've been able to keep them out of my life more often than not. Sure, now that I'm a parent, I won't let my 2 kids have a hamster, but I'm pretty sure the Yorkshire Terrier we have keeps them busy. My phobia became an issue not too long ago. I was driving the kids home from school. Traffic was being rerouted for maintenance, so I had to take a smaller dirt road instead of staying on Main. It wasn't far, and there was barely any traffic. The road goes by a set of fishing cabins, set up around the lake, but was extended to lead back to the main road further up ahead. Usually there's nothing but frogs there. As I drove by, a small family of 6 rats ran straight across the road. This had never happened to me before. My body spasmed, my mind blanked. I panicked and turned the car straight into a pine tree. It was such a strange feeling. I heard this loud scream and tried to cover my ears, only to realize I was the one screaming. My oldest daughter managed to call 911. My reaction was far scarier to them than the crash itself. We were fine. I was driving slowly and everyone turned out okay. Even the car was okay, after some light bodywork. However, my wife insisted I started going to therapy to deal with this fear once and for all. I couldn't say no, not again. There aren't many mental health professionals in the nearby area, so the list of available therapists wasn't long. I could go for 2 sessions a week if it wasn't too far away. I was looking for assisted exposure therapy. Truth be told, I was a bit on edge about the whole thing. My wife was the driving force behind this decision, so she pretty much just pointed me where to go. She chose to sign me up for a session with Dr. Jane Bogan. Dr. Jane was excited to see me. She was in her 40s and had this combed-back Elvira-looking hairdo, but without the volume. At first sight, you might mistake her for a medium or a psychic. It wasn't the best first impression, but her credentials checked out. We shook hands, her wrist rattling with jewelry and chains. She insisted I called her Jane. The office was kind of murky. Dark gray wallpaper with a matching carpet. Plenty of bookshelves with a desk set up by the corner. And of course, fancy leather lounge chairs. the kind you can straighten out to lie down in. Her office assistant, Jeremy, offered me a coffee and a donut before returning to an adjacent room. Apparently, he helped all 4 offices in the building with their scheduling, but Jane was the only one working today. Jeremy was a short, balding man with a tired look. He had some kind of accent, but I couldn't put my finger on what. European, I think. Today he's all ours, Jane joked. Jeremy didn't laugh. Jane and I had a long talk about my phobia. I told her about the tool shed on the top of that grassy hill and the screeching sounds of the rabid rat, the desperate scratching, trying to make a dent in the front door. I told her about the car crash and how my body just seized up and refused to let me act. Jane was a very active listener, asking follow-up questions and making notes along the way. She nodded, made eye contact, and seemed very attentive. She was good. Just talking openly about my fear was refreshing. At the end of the first session, Jane explained her thoughts to me. Until next time, I'll present a treatment plan, but I can already say you are a prime candidate for overexposure therapy. Do you mean exposure therapy? I asked. No, this is different. She smiled and touched my hand. Overexposure is slightly different, but far more effective in the long run. It also doesn't require you to actually meet or touch any rats. It can be done right here in the office. Really? I've never heard of it. I'm licensed to perform it, she said, and stood up. She pointed out a diploma next to her desk. Right there, underneath a degree from Minnesota State, was a license from the Board of Behavioral Health and Therapy, BBHT. It looked official enough, and I didn't have a reason to distrust her. I agreed to discuss it with my wife. Of course, it wasn't much of a discussion. I didn't mind trying something new, and my wife was overjoyed to see me progressing. We tried looking up overexposure therapy, but it didn't give us anything. Most links were just explaining how regular exposure therapy works. I didn't like the idea of facing my fear, but with the guidance of Dr. Jane, it felt a bit easier. She was a professional after all. I called her and agreed to the treatment. She explained it would be best to set aside a full day for it. We booked the upcoming Saturday. It wouldn't be cheap, but she guaranteed a breakthrough. I'd wager my reputation on it, she laughed. The next Saturday, I kissed my wife goodbye and left to see Dr. Jane. I was nervous, but seeing my girls wave goodbye as I pulled out of the driveway calmed my heart. They were so worried about me. I had to get better. When I got to Dr. Jane's office, she was waiting for me in the parking lot. Jeremy was there as well, despite it being a Saturday. My car was the only one in the parking lot, making me wonder if Jane lived nearby and walked to work. As I got out of the car, I noticed Jeremy holding a cup of coffee and a donut. We hadn't even stepped inside yet. He didn't blink much. Glad you could make it, Jane said. It's gonna be a long day. Jeremy handed me the coffee and donut, and we entered the office. One of the lounge chairs was set up so I could lie down. I noticed how Jeremy lingered in the room until Jane stared him down. Then, she turned her attention to me. It felt like staring into a furnace. Have a seat. I laid down as she dimmed the lights. Close your eyes and don't be alarmed, she continued. What are you... I didn't have time to say anything else. Jane touched her thumb to my forehead and my mind was set on fire. That's the only way I can explain the sensation. My mind flared, and there was an intense heat, wave after wave, fanning out from the point on my forehead she touched. Heat, then freezing cold. There was a taste of metal and a smell of burning rubber, like getting a tattoo on my brain. I couldn't open my eyes, and I couldn't feel my hands or feet. It felt like I was sinking into the chair, deeper and deeper. Relax, a disembodied voice demanded. I felt my breath stopping, my heart slowing. Fire turned to ice. I could have sworn I was dying, but my body didn't respond. I was losing control. Then, my eyes burst open. It felt like breaching the surface after diving too deep. My pulse shot through my body like an automatic rifle. I was shaking and my eyes teared up. To call it disorienting would be an understatement. I was still in the office, but it was night. I'd arrived at 10 in the morning. Now it was close to midnight. Jane was gone. Jeremy too. My pockets were empty. I called out, but there was no response. I was alone. I opened the office door and stepped out to the parking lot, only to realize I was actually far from alone. There was Jeremy. His eyes were wide open and seemed larger than usual. The pupils were of different sizes. His mouth was open like a panting dog, revealing a tongue long enough to reach his belly button. He was completely naked and covered in deep, bloodless cuts. He stood in the middle of the parking lot, under the single working light post. He seemed taller, like stretched, soft plastic. We locked eyes. His mouth curled into a smile, never blinking, never closing his mouth. And now, he was sprinting towards me with complete abandon. Naked feet slapped against the concrete. He almost tripped as he stumbled across the curb. I slammed the door shut. Jeremy's entire body weight slammed against the door with a deep splat. The door buckled, but held. Jeremy was screaming. It was a pained, primal shriek, like someone being set on fire. All-enveloping pain, expressed in a rasping and dry voice. I hurried back into the office. One of the bookshelves looked loose, so with enough force, I'd be able to tip it. I had to try. The bookshelf itself wasn't heavy, but the over 100 books on psychology held it down. I summoned all my strength and tipped the whole thing in front of the door. I sat down, back to the bookshelf. I noticed I was screaming too, yelling at him to stop and leave me alone. It wasn't a conscious decision, it just happened. I was so disoriented. It seemed like time was standing still. As Jeremy broke through the door leading in from the parking lot, I braced myself. He flung himself against the office door, but the added weight of the bookshelf and myself was enough to keep it shut. "Stop!" I heard myself scream. "Please, just stop!" I scrambled to hold him back, cutting my thumb open on a splinter. I didn't even notice it until my hand started slipping from my blood. As I stared across the room, I could see the full moon outside the office window. Slowly, a face appeared on the other side of the glass, stepping out of the dark. A woman I'd never seen before, hairless, also with deep cuts across her skin. Eyes wide, pupils differently sized, her mouth wide open, her long tongue pressed against the glass like a dying eel. "No." I heard myself sigh. "Please, just no." She nodded as her mouth turned into a sinister smile. Using her arms and face, she started to break herself against the glass. She didn't bleed from the cuts. I didn't know what to do until the glass shattered. I bolted to the left, through the side door, to the hallway. I followed the corridor to the right as the office door broke behind me. Jeremy was through. I could hear the two of them panting as they chased me. I saw two options: get out through a window or lock myself in the bathroom. I refused to corner myself, so I chose the window. I smashed it with my elbow and climbed out, feeling cold fingers brush against my neck. It was cold outside and dark. I just ran, hearing the panting behind me. I followed a path into a pine forest, getting scratches from the trees across my face. It is nothing short of a miracle that I didn't trip. I paid no attention to my feet. As the ground turned upwards to a hill, I lost my breath. I knew this hill, and this couldn't be here. It was the same hill where I'd been chased into a tool shed as a kid. And there it was. There was nowhere else for me to go. They were faster, and I had to find cover. This was impossible. I'd done this once before, and now I was doing it again. I ran up the hill, flung the old wooden door open, and shut it behind me. The door had a side bolt, so I locked it. There were no windows, but the entire shed was flimsy at best. I cursed myself. This was just another dead end. For minutes, it was quiet. Maybe they hadn't followed me. Maybe they took a different path. I relaxed my breath, feeling blood return to my fingers and toes. Then they came. They smashed themselves against the door. They tore at the frail planks. The pained screams exploded and echoed across the hillside. I couldn't hear myself think. Desperate, I looked where to go next, but I was cornered. "It can't end like this," I panted. "It can't. It won't. Not like this." I cried. I pleaded. There were more of them now, at least 6. One of the planks on the left side broke off, and 5 arms reached for me. Pale arms with deep, bloodless cuts. The full moon reflected unblinking eyes and long, slithering tongues. Not like this. The slide bolt had lost 2 screws. It was a matter of seconds. No! I armed myself with a claw hammer as the door burst open. Jeremy was the first in, but I didn't get the chance to attack. 3 different arms grabbed me, disarmed me, and pushed me onto the floor. Cold, naked flesh pressed against me. Countless eager faces drooled with delight. as teeth pierced my neck. Then, I woke up. The clock showed 20 minutes past 5 in the afternoon. I was on the floor of Dr. Jane's office, curled up in a fetal position. There was a cold towel on my head, and Dr. Jane was calmly stroking my shoulder. My head was warm, and a great headache was subsiding. Jeremy was nowhere around. "There we go," she whispered. "You're fine, you're fine." I couldn't speak. I was shaking like a leaf. Jane helped me back up in the seat. "That was the end of the treatment," she smiled. "You're done." What was... I had completely forgotten why I was there in the first place. Jane reached for something. "Hold out your hands," she said. I did as she asked. A second later, a small white mouse was placed in my palms. The confused little thing just sniffed me and stood on its hind legs. I didn't react. In my mind, I was about to be eaten alive, just seconds ago. "You seem to be cured," Jane smiled. "Treatment successful. You can give him back now if you want." I wouldn't mind holding him for a bit. I really didn't. I wanted the little mouse to stay. It was a tiny comfort. A living creature I could feel meant me no harm. "Good," nodded Jane. "So, what happened?" "You were overexposed," said Jane, filling out some paperwork. "An extreme stress reaction dampens all other reactions." "I don't understand." "Say you have an oven with 4 settings," she continued. 4 being the highest setting. That's where you were with your fear of rats. Maximum power, strength 4. She handed the paper over to me. It was her bill for the day. "I changed your maximum setting to 10. Suddenly a 4 doesn't seem so bad." "But how?" She sat down across from me and locked her eyes to mine. There was something dark in there, a hint of red. "I'm very good at what I do." She took my hand and turned it over. That's when I noticed the cut along my thumb. I was allowed to keep the white mouse. I bought him a little cage, some toys, and plenty of food. When I got home that night, my wife couldn't believe her eyes. My girls named the mouse Kenny, and he was gently played with late into the night, much to our Yorkie's dismay. My wife called it a miracle, but I didn't know what to call it. My mind was still in a daze. I find myself thinking back to that day. It wasn't a dream or a vision. It was real. It had to be. Thumbs don't cut themselves on imaginary splinters. Sometimes I find myself staring into the mirror, seeing my pupils dilate into different sizes. It feels like my tongue has grown longer. Hell, my forehead seems to have a slight magnetic pull where Dr. Jane touched me. It's a very unusual kind of headache. There was also an incident just a few days ago where I cut my finger dicing potatoes. Not a drop of blood came out. I barely even felt it. I can't bring myself to go back to Dr. Jane. If there is even a slight chance she'll put me back on that hill, I won't ever talk to her or see her again. I might have had the fear of rats scared out of me, but it has been replaced by this deep, existential dread for what Dr. Jane could do to me if she wanted to. What has she done to me? And why can't I bleed?
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.